Please close your eyes. Free your mind of distracting thoughts. Focus your third eye and penetrate deeply into the inner space of the great silence. Let your ball of identity bounce from the confines of the flesh. Let it leave the body as a ball bouncing across the miles of terra, moving as a nucleus of energy over the surface of the earth, then bouncing across the cosmic highways. See yourself bouncing on the grid of energy that is pure intelligence, translucent, glistening chords, intermeshed with the interplay of identities in and through the mind that is God. See yourself everywhere in the vastness of consciousness that is God. Now, put your sole focus on our master Morya. Feel Morya's magnetic power of pure devotion to the will of God, beckoning you to the temple of goodwill in the etheric plain over the city of Darjeeling, India, in the foothills of the Himalayas. Follow the radiant currents of light emanating from his retreat. Gliding on these magnificent streams of energy, you see in the distance an exquisite, gleaming, white marble palace of Moorish design. Part of the palace resides in the etheric octave, but also has structures in the physical dimension in the hills surrounding the city. The temple is a square structure with a large flame-shaped dome protruding upward from its center. At each of the four corners rises teardrop-shaped white marble minarets that rise a full story above the four-story main building. And as you pass over the building, you see that it has a very large open rooftop terrace. Here, special ceremonies are held under the stars. There is also an astronomical observatory with a great telescope and other machinery for tracking the position of the celestial bodies. Remember, our beloved El Morya was embodied as Melchior, one of the three wise men who perfected the science of cosmic astrology. You navigate between many angels of white fire and blue lightning, over 10 feet high, as they are coming and going from the retreat. You touch down on the other side of the etheric retreat, next to a large lily pool filled with sparkling, effervescent water and fragrant lotus blossoms of every size and color. And as you admire the beautiful landscape, you see in the distance coming toward you two beings of great light. One is a feminine figure with robes of flaming violet with a design of gold thread woven throughout. And the other is a male figure dressed in a vibrant blue suit with wide lapels and a bow tie. He has the most incredible sweet smile, a brilliant twinkle in his eye, and a vibration of simplicity and genuineness. You immediately connect with him as a very special friend, someone you have known for many, many lifetimes. He comes up to you, embracing you, saying, "Welcome to the Temple of Goodwill. I am Uncle George Lancaster, and this is Lady Master Mary Lou Majerus. Both of us ascended from the Summit Lighthouse activity under El Morya. They motion you to follow, and as you enter the temple grounds, you hear the musical tinkling of the fountains. The building is surrounded by magnificent formal gardens of the most incredible tall blue roses. You stand at the foot of a long column of marble steps leading up to the entrance of the building. And as you ascend, you are amazed as you look out upon the grandeur of the Himalaya mountains, rising crest after crest into the distance. Arriving at the upper landing, you see two massive golden doors. You stand face to face with a very tall gatekeeper. His voice is gruff. He is not dressed in the best of attire, and he has no appearance whatsoever of mastery, or even being worthy to stand at the gate of the master's retreat. You are puzzled by how our great master would put this gatekeeper as a welcoming face to his magnificent retreat. However, in the spirit of Christ's love, you determine to converse with him warmly. The gatekeeper, touched by your cordiality, says, Morya opens his door constantly to different life streams who desire to come closer to the will of God. He invites you to his retreat where he and the brothers of the Diamond Heart open their arms and say, come to our fireside. Warm yourselves upon the sacred fires. Partake of our holy communion. The gatekeeper pulls the long chain hanging beside the great doors, and a melodious bell sounds, reverberating through the stillness of the countryside. The doors open silently, and the splendor of the magnificent entrance is revealed. Lady Master Mary Lou, praising your graciousness, explains about the nature of the gatekeeper. Here at Darjeeling, the initiations begin right at the very door of Morya's retreat. The master purposefully chooses a very gruff chela to tend the entrance. And if those who knock at the door of the retreat have disdain for the gatekeeper, then the master determines that they are not worthy to be received at his retreat. As you enter, you see a vibrant painting of Abraham, seen entertaining 3 angels as recorded in the Old Testament. Uncle George explains that when the ascended master El Morya was Abraham, it was representative of his qualities throughout his many embodiments to the present hour, and even from the ascended state. Our beloved El Morya has outpictured the qualities of the father principal, the statesman, the executive, and the ruler. This first floor is the headquarters of the inner world government, Uncle George explains. Here there are numerous council chambers where the brothers of the Diamond Heart meet to discuss the plans of the brotherhood for the most effective release of the flame of the will of God. Also here, public servants, world and community leaders, and holders of public office are schooled between embodiments and in their finer bodies during sleep in the understanding of the intricacies of the will of God in politics, in religion, in business, in finance, and in education. You come to the main auditorium. Let us go in, says Uncle George, as today have come souls from around the world to honor the founding of the Summit Lighthouse activity. And as you take your seat in the very back, as the entire auditorium is full, the speaker is in the middle of a lecture. My spiritual quest, says the speaker, sprang from my childhood recollection of past lives and my determination to find confirmation of the truth that Jesus was speaking to me in my heart. When I was at Boston University in May of 1961, I was walking through a park to school when suddenly a being of light crossed my path. The moment I saw him, I knew him. It was the ascended master, El Morya. He looked almost 7 feet tall. His aura was vibrating with a tremendous dedication to the will of God. He was such an impassioned dedication to the will of God that it inspired me in a tremendous trust. It was so impassioned that it became a sternness, almost an abruptness, an intensity of being that one scarcely observes from day to day in people. He looked at me with those intense eyes and said, "Elizabeth, I have need of a feminine messenger. Go to Washington, and I will train you through Mark Prophet. And if you pass your initiations, Saint Germain will come and anoint you as a messenger for the ascended masters. Furthermore," he said, "my dear Miss Prophet, that your decision would determine whether or not there would be an organization of the Great White Brotherhood that was active, alive, with a voice and a messenger in this century." He said that what I did would have ramifications to the Brotherhood, the government, the planet, the solar system, and beyond. He didn't even wait for an answer, and he was off, and I was left standing there. He appeared to me so concretely, looking like any physical person, and yet he was not physical. He had raised my consciousness, cleared my third eye, and lowered himself to another plane. And there was a meeting of frequencies in vibration. And so, obedient to El Morya's call, I flew from Boston to Washington, D.C. to attend my first conference, Freedom 1961. I was 22 years old at the time, and almost all who attended were middle-aged or elderly. This conference was held at a hotel called the Dodge House, where we held many of our events in the first couple years. It has since been torn down. Through 4 days of this conference, I could scarcely believe what I saw. I watched Mark Prophet deliver dictations from the Ascended Masters. They were stupendous. At that time, Mark was responsible for all the preparations for the conference himself, even planning the altar decor. He did everything. A couple of days before the class, he could be seen in his overalls, cleaning the floor in the rented rooms, putting up the master's pictures, the thought form of the class, and all other details. And then, when the day of the conference would arrive, Mark would be in his suit or robe, delivering the word of God. The Ascended Master El Morya first appeared to Mark when he was a young man, but unable to recognize the turbaned Eastern adept with his lifelong devotion to Jesus, Mark dismissed him. Years later, having realized that the path of the Ascended Masters was also the path of Jesus, Mark accepted Morya as his teacher and answered the call to be a messenger of the Great White Brotherhood. From 1945 until 1952, Mark lectured on Christian and Eastern mysticism and the masters of wisdom. Then he began publishing a series of letters for his students called Ashram Notes, dictated by El Morya. In 1957, El Morya called Mark to Washington, D.C. to found the Summit Lighthouse and publish the teachings of the Ascended Masters. I want to emphasize to you, El Morya did sacrifice greatly to bring forth this activity. Only El Morya, beloved, would begin with such tiny beginnings of only 3 individuals who did come together. Blessed ones, it is truly amazing what the faith of the will of God and the Chohan of the first ray can work. And our beloved El Morya did commit jewels and other momentums of attainment. Great was the gift of his heart as collateral for that which was to be. The Summit Lighthouse was formally established on August 7th, 1958. On that day, Mark Prophet, Francis Icky, and Christelle Anderson gathered in Philadelphia for the first board meeting. 7 ascended masters gave the founding dictations: Archangel Michael, the Elohim of Peace, Saint Germain, the Mahachohan, Gautama Buddha, Godfrey, and El Morya. The first sanctuary for the Summit Lighthouse was a room on the top floor of a brownstone house close to the heart of the nation's capital, where Mark was living at that time. Mark would sit at his manual typewriter under a 300-watt light bulb and receive the master's dictation for the pearls of wisdom. Among the few furnishings in his room were a rug, a large picture of El Morya, a phonograph, and one record entitled Hearts and Flowers. This phonograph record had been used so much that the needle would stick on a certain spot each time it played. One time when Mark was very discouraged, he asked, El Morya, would you please give me a sign? And immediately a beam of light shot out from El Morya's picture, picked up the arm of the photograph, moved the needle beyond the worn spot on the record, and the music continued. Mark's faith was reaffirmed by this startling demonstration, and he promised never to doubt the master again. In July of 1960, he held his first major conference on East 72nd Street in New York City in the sanctuary of a lovely old mansion owned by a wealthy woman. I had actually met Mark for the first time on April 22nd, 1961. I attended a gathering in a tiny room in an old building in Boston. Just a handful of people were there. When I sat down, I found myself sitting opposite the messenger, Mark Prophet. I looked into his eyes, and I realized then that I had been looking for that pair of eyes all my life. I can only describe them as a pair of eyes that had met the eyes of God. He had a profound understanding, a wisdom, and a love that was extraordinary. I had found my teacher. I knew that I had found the one who could open the door of consciousness. And so about a month later, when El Morya first appeared to me, I eagerly answered his call to be trained as a messenger under Mark Prophet and entered into a period of intense spiritual discipline and inner soul awakening. In 1962, the Summit Lighthouse bought its first printing press. Until then, there were no published dictations, no bound volumes of the weekly letters from the masters known as Pearls of Wisdom. The press was delivered to my apartment in Arlington, Virginia, where I printed the Pearls of Wisdom in my living room. I also ran the tape recorder to record Mark dictations. I set up the filing system and set up our membership mailing list on note cards that I kept in a shoebox. I remember the day when it became 2 shoeboxes. I couldn't believe we had so many members. Fortunately, Morya's invisible hand had guided me in my early life, taking me on the path to practical experience. And by the time I was 22, I had so many experiences in so many areas that I actually had the background to do what I subsequently had to do to run the Summit organization. Looking back on it, it was amazing. I did everything from gardening to working in an international newspaper, an insurance company, a publishing company, as a typist, and in a scientific department in a major university, and on and on. Later that year, the organization bought a house in Fairfax, Virginia, and called it Holy Tree House for the abundance of holly trees on the property. It was a small, little, one-story building with a basement. I cooked and ran the press until other staff members were able. Mark and I were married on March 16, 1963, in Annapolis, Maryland, and Mark told me then that his tenure on Earth was drawing to a close. He emphasized that he only had one thing left to do, and that is to transfer the mantle of messenger to you. On May 9th, 1964, our first child, Sean Christopher Prophet, was born at Holy Treehouse. Shortly after that, Mark went on his first tour. He took off in his little green Saab and traveled throughout the United States and contacted just about every person on the mailing list. In January 65, Holy Treehouse was sold for a profit, and we moved to a larger property in Vienna, Virginia. Morya named this lovely house Beacon's Head. Later that year, Gautama Buddha gave his New Year's Eve address at Beacon's Head and directed us to move to Colorado Springs, Colorado. And on January 1, 1966, everyone, except me, drove to Colorado Springs. I flew to Colorado because I was expecting my second child anytime. Aaron Lynn Prophet was born January 23rd. Mark and the staff had just taken possession of the property when Aaron and I arrived home from the hospital. The beautiful Broadmoor Mansion, a Shakespearean castle, as Mark described it, called La Tourelle, became the worldwide headquarters of the Summit Lighthouse. The Easter class was held in the beautiful sanctuary, newly painted white and gold. La Tourelle was our headquarters from 1966 through 1976, and after that, a community teaching center until its sale in 1984. At the Easter class of 1971, the Divine Mother Omega consecrated La Tourelle as the retreat of the resurrection spiral. On October 25th, 1968, our third child, Moira Ellen Prophet, was born. In August and September, we embarked on a European tour, lecturing and clearing the records of Black magic and witchcraft in Europe. In 1969, the Mother House in Santa Barbara was established near beautiful Mission, Santa Barbara. For many years, it was our central focus. It was here that in July 1971 that Mark Prophet inaugurated the first session of Ascended Master University that later was called Summit University. The Mother House was sold in 1983. In April 1970, we visited Darjeeling, Kashmir, and many religious and historical centers throughout India. We met the Dalai Lama, Indira Gandhi, Mother Teresa, holy men and people from all walks of life. Mark delivered a sermon at Sarnath, where Gautama Buddha first began to teach. Several of the students who went on the India pilgrimage are now ascended masters. In November of 1970, Mark and I founded Montessori International. On January 15th, 1972, Tatiana Prophet was born. In June, Mark opened the Four Wings Organic Center, a restaurant and health food store in Colorado Springs. Mark loved to meet the people who came in to eat at his restaurant. In June, we went to Hawaii, where Mark gave lectures from town to town. Many people recognized him as their spiritual leader and followed him back to La Tourelle, where they joined staff. In July, we toured and lectured in Ghana, Africa. In October, we led 70 pilgrims to the Holy Land. On Sunday, February 18th, 1973, as I delivered Jesus' dictation in Colorado Springs, Colorado, Mark Prophet simultaneously gave his final delivery in Santa Barbara, California. It included a lecture entitled, "You Can Become One with God," followed by a dictation from Saint Germain. The Brotherhood called this event a tale of two cities. Mark told me it's the city of heaven and the city of earth. And so one of us had to make our abode in the city of heaven and one in the city of earth, the goal being that the two cities become one city. 8 days after this dictation, on February 26, 1973, Mark Prophet made his ascension from Colorado Springs, whereupon he revealed his ascended master name to be Lanello. This event represented the passing of the torch of the mission to me. Shortly after his ascension, Lanello gave 2 private dictations to the staff, As Jesus taught his disciples for 40 days after his resurrection, so Linnell offered his staff access to his causal body for 40 days. At the 1973 Easter class held at La Tourelle, Linnell spoke to 400 keepers of the flame. This was the largest gathering of keepers of the flame to that date. Mark's ascension brought a virtual explosion in the membership of the Summit Lighthouse. That summer, 1,000 students attended the July Freedom Conference. And so these were the early days of the summit. And with that, Guru Ma dematerializes. Exiting the auditorium, you walk to the far end of the first floor. You come to the great spiral staircase leading to the upper levels of the palace. And right there is the most exquisite, life-size tapestry of King Arthur sitting with his knights. In this embodiment, Morya guarded the inner teachings and created a focus of God in the outer world. The tapestry is woven in the most heavenly colors. It seems alive, and it is almost as if it were guarding the way. You climb the stairs with excitement. Exiting on the second floor, you first come to a beautiful vestibule with immense and elegant gold doors. Peeking in, you see a chamber designed in a blue and gold motif with a large semicircular screen and seats arranged in theater style. Lady Mary Lou explains, Master Morya maintains this chamber on which there can be projected the experiences of other incarnations in the full dimensions that are portrayed from the Akashic record. Chelas come here in their finer bodies to gain perspective of the past and how it created the present, and thus they can gain a greater understanding of their very personal path to salvation. Continuing on, down the hallway, you come to a large archway entrance with a golden plate over it, engraved with Sanskrit writing, identifying this chamber as the formal meeting room for the members of the Darjeeling Council of the Great White Brotherhood. In this council chamber, Morya presides at roundtable meetings where the souls of the world's statesmen and men and women of integrity in God's will convene to study under this living master. The council and its chief, El Morya, assists mankind and train souls for world service in God government and the economy to establish the inner Christ as the foundation for religion, education, and return to the golden age culture. It was here that Ascended Master El Morya received President John F. Kennedy after his passing in 1963. Continuing on down the long hallway, you come to the most exquisite door you have ever seen. It is all wood and of a rich walnut shade and engraved in many beautiful engravings. You follow the guides into the private office suite of our beloved master. His hand-carved desk stands at the far end of the room. On the desk, you see Morya's favorite flowers, the forget-me-not and blue roses, along with a portrait of the master's dearly beloved Kathumi. In the corner, there is a large vase of roses on a carved rosewood piano. The music is still resonating through the air. You recognize the melody. Believe me, if all those endearing young charms, a song from Morya's heart when he was embodied as Thomas Moore, the Irish poet who wrote many ballads. To this day, the song draws the power of his intense love for the will of God as representative of the highest good. To the side of the piano is an adjoining room. You follow Uncle George as you enter. You sink into a very plush, blue and rose and gold woven oriental rug. The room is filled with a heavenly odor of sandalwood, Morya's fragrance. This is the master's private study, says Mary Lou, and as you look around, you see that it contains an incredible library. The walls are lined with sacred books that impart the future plans of hierarchy, including diagrams of New Age cities, great works of art, and much, much more. All this shall be brought forth in that day when humanity bends the knee to universal purpose. A fire burns in the fireplace with a fiery blue radiance. There is an alcove area with a small wood and glass coffee table surrounded by several rich-looking leather armchairs. They face a bay window that looks out upon a breathtaking view of the scintillating Himalayan snows topping the crests of the majestic peaks nearby. Uncle George invites you to sit down and enjoy the view. You sink into one of the beautiful leather chairs, thinking how incredibly comfortable. The two masters sit as well. Would you like tea? Of course you would. I tell you that it is so rare that we may share time with you by the fireside, contemplating the immortal purpose. And as Uncle George chats, a fine china tea service materializes on the table. You think to yourself, the whole atmosphere is a personification of splendor and elegance. It is an atmosphere of homeliness and warmth that enters deeply into your heart. Lady Mary Lou continues the conversation, explaining that in his final embodiment, Morya was born a Rajput prince in India and later became a monk frequenting the retreats of the Himalayas. As the Master M, he, together with Kuthumi and Dwal Khul, attempted to acquaint mankind with the workings of the law and hierarchy through his writings of Madame H.P. Blavatsky. Together with the Master K.H. and Saint Germain, he founded the Theosophical Society. Morya ascended in 1898 and continues his great work for God government on earth through the flame of goodwill and his embodied Chilas. And suddenly, the tranquil ambiance is interrupted as a gleam of white light enters your field of vision. And you see towering above you in his great stature, an oriental clad in white garments and wearing a headcloth or a turban of amber striped fabric, hand embroidered in yellow floss silk. Long raven hair hangs from under his turban to the shoulders. His beard, parted vertically on the chin in the Rajput fashion, is twisted up at the end and carried over the ears. His eyes are alive with soul fire, eyes which at once benignant and piercing in glance, the eyes of a mentor and judge, but softened by the love of a father who gazes on a son needing counsel and guidance. You are in awe. He is so grand a man, so imbued with the majesty of moral strength, so luminously spiritual, so evidently above humanity, that you feel abashed in his presence. You bow your head and bend your knee as one does before a godlike personage. A sweet, though strong voice bids you welcome, and when you raise your eyes, Morya is seated on the other chair beyond the table. He looks at you and begins to discourse. Blessed heart, this is the day when you ought to recognize the 7 founders of this activity of the Summit Lighthouse, and for you to make your pact with these 7 who spoke that day, to enjoin them and to seal your hearts in that grand alliance of the ages. Thus, may you bring forward to the present all the dispensations of these years, especially that of the inception, that the very initiation of the dispensation from the great central sun that did unleash a spiral. And I tell you, beloved, these 2 acts are the greatest in history of this present world. The first is the founding of this civilization on the foundations of freedom and the principles of God, whereby 200 years later, there could come about the second, the founding of the Summit Lighthouse as the spiritual culmination and the capstone on that pyramid. These are the Alpha and the Omega of this civilization. I ask you to claim the causal bodies of all ascended masters who are part of that founding with Saint Germain, as well as the causal bodies of those unspoken who were with me in 1958 in Philadelphia. Every line of their dictations in my own. Every dispensation is forever, as long as you will claim it again and again and seal it in your heart. See what you can do for me, beloved. I need you in this hour. This is my cry to you in this hour. Tempus fugit. I am with you always. And with that, Morya dematerializes. Uncle George says, please follow me. He leads you down a long corridor to another great hall. And as you enter, you see the auditorium is full. There are both ascended masters as well as unascended chelas. They await the word of our beloved chief. You take your seat in the great hall along with the others. El Morya materializes at the podium. Everyone stands in honor of the chief of the Darjeeling Council for his great wisdom and his great sacrifice as he begins to speak.
Hail to the chelas of the sacred fire. Hail to the chelas of the great Lord, the Mahachohan. Hail to the chelas of Almighty God. So I say, penetrate, activate, penetrate, activate, penetrate, activate, and now be seated. Penetrate the deeper levels of your own God-free being, then activate that divine spark that you discover at the very core of every atom and cell of your very life and blueprint. Penetrate deeper into the mysteries of God, then activate the mysteries as practicality in your life. Penetrate, then activate old karmic debris as dead leaves at the bottom of the electronic belt. Activate, let the fire descend, propelled by the fervor of your heart. Consume then, those ashes of mortality. Consume them and let lilies spring forth at the very base of being. Now I say, you and you and you, who have been chelas and staff members for so long, I say, it is time that you come into a rapprochement with me and my messenger, that you cast into the fire all blame, all burden, all justification or non-justification. Some of you need liberation, as liberation can be and has never been before. I desire and I send forth the blue lightning of the mind of God from the spherote, yes, from the tree of life, yes, from your mighty I am presence. Bolts of blue lightning descend now into your being. Resist them not, for if you resist them, they then become deadly. Let them pass through the wide open spaces of your being. Let the blue lightning of the mind of God descend to purge and purify, and I say, no lukewarm chelas anymore. No lukewarm chelas anymore. Come into the fire of the will of God. Come into the joy of the great freedom of the messenger, the great freedom of the ascended masters. And now I say to you, I will introduce to you this night not one, but many surprise guests, and therefore the first of those surprise guests are all of the members of the Darjeeling Council of the Great White Brotherhood, and these are untold numbers, beloved, but I shall give you the beginning, 144, 12 on each of the lines of the clock. So receive them, the members of the Darjeeling Council, for they are aware of Amrita's message of urgency. Thank you, beloved. There are then 144 sealed members of the Darjeeling Council. There are other untold members and numbers of members that extend beyond that circle, beloved. And many of these are attachés, research assistants, and those who move with us to search those files whereby we may contribute to this civilization the advancements that have not been made in previous civilizations because of the blindness of the people or their selfishness or their karma. Thus, beloved, the Darjeeling Council has many assistants, and you recognize certain of their names: the great divine director, the Blessed Mother Mary, Mighty Victory, your own beloved Lanello, those who have come from the Chohan's retreats, the Chohans themselves. There are archangels among us, and this body, beloved, multiplying their electronic presence, does reach out and touch those souls upon earth. Every single soul is touched in his time and in his due, and those who do not respond are left then for some time, sometimes decades, sometimes centuries, and sometimes more. For the opening of the door to a soul of light, to be a chela with a figure-8 flow to my heart, is a great opportunity, and thus that opportunity is extended with regularity. But if it is shunned, if it is abused, if it is trampled upon, then, beloved, it becomes a karma-making situation. Therefore, recognize that I am not the only one that flies from Darjeeling with my turban unfurled because I have not had time to fasten it. I tell you, many of us are shooting here and there like rockets, dealing with the terrible situations nation by nation, and especially are we concerned with this generation of the children of the newborn babes and those who are coming and rising to that level of responsibility in their nations. Beloved, Earth is a major challenge for us and for you. Therefore, now be seated. This challenge, beloved, involves the contacting of those individuals who can respond to us. And therefore we find that these members, the fiery core of the 144, these ones have contacts with many souls upon earth, and this is one of the major regions of their being selected to be on the council. For that personal contact that has been made over the centuries while these ascended masters and angelic beings have been in embodiment, these contacts therefore will recognize our members, and thus you can see as for yourself, when you make a major contribution to society, then you become well known, then you take your ascension, then you have many upon earth through whom which you can move. But this does not discount those who do not have a name for themselves and yet are the constant servers of light on the earth, and when they take their ascension in the octaves of light. So whether you have a name recognition or you do not, beloved, you have the opportunity to reach millions. I ask you to consider this, because ascended masters who have not balanced their karma must work through those who will recognize them. And this has happened to you, beloved. You have had a recognition of certain of the ascended masters, and those names that have been given to you of ascended masters have been given for this very reason, because they have had great contact with millions of souls on previous continents and in previous ages. Understand then that each and every one of you who has been drawn into this activity of light has that great connection to the Great White Brotherhood through one ascended master who has followed you through the ages, who has contacted you, and thereby in the very presence of that one, you are growing accustomed to that great one, not even realizing that a part of your aura and being is the extension of that one's presence. Therefore, beloved, you have entered the path. You have been protected by that sponsor, by that friend that you befriended long ago, perhaps rendering him great service, for which he will tirelessly render unto you great gratitude and blessings. Thus, whether you have friends at the court of King Arthur, or at the court of the sacred fire, you can make friends by affixing yourself alongside of those ascended masters who royally have received you at the Grand Teton Retreat, who have come from near and far in systems of worlds, and in their fiery determination, as though cloaked in the fires of the seraphim, they have spoken to you, they have reached out to you, and out of their eyes has come forth that violet, purple, blue light, and in that light, beloved, you have been saved from a downward spiral and raised to a higher level of consciousness. Beloved, I speak to you then of the sponsorship by the Darjeeling Council of all individuals who are in the leadership positions of the nations, whether in government, the economy, education, the arts, sciences, and so forth. We have many, many representatives, beloved, and we also count you as those representatives, and we ask you to knock on the door of the Darjeeling Council this night, to come to Darjeeling and to make known to us your professions, your callings, and how you will lend them to this endeavor, for there are 5.5 billion souls, more or less, in embodiment, and many out of embodiment seeking entree into this world, and therefore we would deal with you and we would train you in those things that you are already qualified for, having majored in certain areas of life for thousands of years. You have a great contribution to make, and by that contribution, beloved, you shall earn your ascension in the light. Think of it, beloved, all that you have banked on the fires of being on the heart chakra, on that altar of the heart over many past ages, all comes together now, and you can use that matrix and that chalice, as we have told you before, for a tremendous and mighty victory in this hour. I, Morya, have spoken to you. I ask you to give your decrees for the exposure and binding of the corrupt ones in every nation upon earth, at the point of leadership, at the point of the control of the military establishment, at the point of the control of the economy. Blessed hearts, it is vital. It is absolutely vital that the corrupt ones in positions of power be bound and judged, and I tell you, with Archangel Uriel at my side this night, that the angel of the Lord's judgment, Archangel Uriel, has reported to us in the Darjeeling chambers that many, once again, have been given notice at inner levels that their time is up. Thus it is a time again to call for the judgment of the corrupt leaders of the nations and the cutting free of souls of light who can fill those positions. Beloved ones, if there are vacancies because fallen angels incarnate are judged, then I say, do not leave that vacuum a vacuum. Step into it. Even if you think you are not qualified, you can study. You are still young enough to take your degrees, even if you are at the midpoint in life. You can study and you can fill the vacancies occupied by the fallen ones. I ask you to consider this according to your skills, according to your ability, and to recognize what it does take to be in positions of government. Thus, beloved ones, I ask you to pray then that the leadership of this nation will be founded upon the principles of the white fire core of being and of the Divine Mother, that you will demand the resignation of those who are not serving the people and serving Almighty God, but only self-serving. I tell you, beloved ones, what can we do when the fallen ones are in power? Their day is done, beloved ones, and it is the day of the rise of the light bearers. Therefore, may we look to light bearers who in the light side of life are equally accomplished and talented in the fields of business, in the fields of communication, in the fields of education. Understand this one, beloved. You must be equal to and greater than the fallen ones that you have displaced. I am fully confident, as I am, El Morya, that my presence over you will make the difference. So, beloved, in profound humility, in humbleness before the God flame within you, I step into your aura now, if you will have me. Receive me, beloved, for I come in profoundest love. I thank you for providing the vessel and the chalice of your 4 lower bodies daily to me in my service with you to the will of God.
No. Uncle George says, please follow me. He leads you down a long corridor to another great hall. As you enter, Uncle George and Mary Lou motion you to follow as they lead you to the stairwell to the 3rd floor. You see art treasures all around, many intricate carvings in Indian and Tibetan designs engraved in the white marble. You stop at the entrance to the sacred flame chamber. Uncle George raises his right hand, and the doors of the flame room opens. The room is exquisite indeed, beyond description. The walls are made of a sparkling white material, which are contrasted by a royal blue vaulted ceiling. The floor has an inlaid design, a cosmic pattern representing divine geometry in a mosaic of many shades of blue. The altar is composed of exquisite blue sapphires and diamonds. The flame rises out of the gold chalice and is a mighty pillar of goodwill. It pulsates with a royal blue center with deeper and lighter shades flowing without as facets of the will of God. At the far end is an altar that is the focus of the diamond heart. Sitting in lotus position around the altar in a sacred circle, chanting praises, are the brothers of the diamond heart. These holy brothers are garbed in royal blue robes of oriental design with an emblem of a diamond heart embroidered on the front. They wear blue sashes and a blue cape, the shade of which represents the graded service of the brother in the order. One of the priestly brothers looks at you speaking in a soft, celestial voice, saying, "We would share with you the communion cup of the saints and the holy bread of angels as you give your vows to the obedience of the will of God." Suddenly, a flash of light radiates in the front of the sacred altar. Morya and Lanello materialize. Lanello is garbed in his famous blue cape, a most notable garment that covers his ankles and arms, and is complete with hood like the monks of old. Morya is dressed in a white robe and a white turban with a bright blue sapphire in the front. He is surrounded by 3 blue lightning angels, similar to the painting of the patriarch Abraham in the entryway. Lanello will bless the communion, and following, Morya will seal it with an invocation.